State of play, More like State of Sony! I'm recording this little reaction video to Sony's most recent attempt of a string of video game announcements with State of Play September 2019, about 15 minutes after it happened. This is as fresh in my head as it could possibly be, and obviously, I'm a PlayStation fan. I do play PC, I do play Xbox sometimes, well, more 360, but beside the point. I'm not a fanboy, I don't, prefer one thing over the other. I think everything's got its merits, but yeah, I'm mostly PS4 and PC. This is coming from a PC and PS4 player, and oh my god, I don't even know what to say about what we just saw. State of Play needs to be cancelled. It needs to stop. And I say this because what I just witnessed was one of the biggest wastes of time I've seen in a long old while. I don't understand the thought process from PlayStation, why they thought that everyone would be okay with this in today's internet climate. I don't mean politically, I'm just talking in general video gaming in terms of social media. This was obviously not going to go down well, so I'm stumped as to why they went through with it. And I'm sure you're all aware that E3 2019, Sony didn't go, PlayStation didn't have a conference, and at the time I was kind of like, well, I mean, it's a big culture shock, I suppose, as far as E3 is concerned, but I didn't think it was the end of the world, necessarily. I just figured that what Sony were doing was, after they said, oh, we're going to be doing State of Play now, like Nintendo are doing Nintendo Direct, so I figured, oh, wow, so that must mean they are going to prepare us the best of everything that they have, and show it all off in a string of announcements, professionally edited, professionally presented, no live action nonsense, nothing going wrong, no audiences, no demonstrations going wrong live on stage, all that cringy stuff. None of that is going to happen. And I'm glad because, I mean, Xbox have had their blunders, but PlayStation have had a lot of blunders when it comes to E3. PS3 launch price, the PSP stuff. A lot of, I mean, every company has their moments, but yeah, Sony has got quite a lot of them, so I can see why they decided they wanted to be taken more seriously, I guess, but this is not how you do it. This is just not how you do it. Because after them not showing up at E3 this year, yeah, if this is all they had up their sleeves, I can see why they didn't go to E3. It's not like there wasn't anything new to show off, or nothing exciting that are in the works, because there is. They did have, sprinkles of that kind of stuff in it. But it mostly felt like where Nintendo Direct has the Nintendo brand and Nintendo charm behind it, and it goes all out with it. It has the presenters on the screen, it has little skits back and forth with the Nintendo IP characters, and obviously Nintendo have all of their IPs, which makes them better by default, because they can cram their Nintendo Directs full of exclusive stuff that no one's ever seen before, can get everybody excited for the next Nintendo branded thing. PlayStation are more universal, they can't get away with that. So when they can't get away with that, they need to save something like State of Play for when they have, a counter-attack to the other companies. I figured personally that Sony didn't go to E3 2019 because they were working on the PS5 and doing all that kind of shady stuff, and what I thought they were doing was holding back and letting Xbox and Nintendo and all the other big, Nintendo and Microsoft, so letting those guys come out, and just in case they had any new console project announcements, and stuff like that, I figured that Sony were holding back for a counterattack. I figured they were waiting for prices to be announced for a new thing that Xbox were working on, or the power and the specs to be announced, and then they were going to go, okay, now we've got this, how do you like that? So it wouldn't have been as well timed as the PS4 versus the Xbox One when those two were first announced, and the Xbox One was a total train wreck, and so Sony luckily swooped in and managed to steal the show, essentially. Maybe they didn't want to risk doing something like that again when it turns out that they were providing a worse deal if they announced the PS5 too early and then Xbox counterattacked with their prices and stuff. I don't know how the politics between these companies work, but I figured that's why they weren't at E3. So, State of Play, I wasn't against the idea at all. I quite like the idea, but if they're going to just be like this for the rest of time, I no, stop. I would rather have separate singular announcements that are given a lot of build-up and a lot of surprise reveal streams, and then that's it. Because this was a big waste of time. This was... It's hard to describe, really, so I'm going to try describing it. So we started the stream off with a reveal of a new game called Humanity, and I don't know anything about this game, but to me it looks like a total chaotic mess. And when it started playing on the screen, I really thought it was a tech demo, you know, like how like Nintendo did like the millions of Marios on the same screen. So I figured that this was a tech demo showing off the PS5's capabilities and how much they could render on the same screen and blah 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 blah. And oh no, it's actually a video game. This bland, featureless, millions of people being pushed around thing is a game, apparently. And if you like the look of the game, then this would have been a decent start to the presentation for you. But for me, not only was I not interested in the game, but it confused me more than anything, because with the PS5 looming in everyone's minds right now, and next-gen technology being the trending discussion, I don't know why a game like this, with so many rendered characters, wouldn't have been saved for the PS5 anyway. I don't know what they're getting out of this presentation by showing everybody, hey, look at all these millions of people that we can render on screen. Did you know the PS4 can do that? Well, PS4's been out for a while now. I don't need to know all this tech demo-y kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's not impressive, but if we're going to see stuff like that, then it better be to show off how different the last system was to the new system, not showing off in the last kind of dying breath of the PS4 with the PS5 on the horizon that this is something that's happening and it's very impressive and graphically cool and blah blah blah. It was just confusing. It was really confusing. It felt like a tech demo, but it wasn't. And it's towards the end of the PS4's lifespan, at least I'm assuming the end of the PS4's lifespan. And so after I started off confused, I went to right out bored, because we went straight to Call of Duty. Yeah, we went from confusing to forgettable. Even though I just watched the stream like 15 minutes ago or however long it was, I don't remember a thing that happened here. It's more Call of Duty, and I don't understand the title either. Is this a renaming the original Modern Warfare? Is it a reboot? Are we starting all over again? Well, if we're starting all over again, then why does it look the same? And even better, it was for a game that's coming out in the next few weeks, so it's not like any hype was being built up anyway. It felt like an advert, a commercial. So at this point, I didn't have any high hopes. I figured that if we're already at this point, and this is how they choose to kick the presentation off, then this must mean that they had a much bigger announcement planned for E3, but then they pulled out at the last minute because it wasn't ready, and so they delayed it until this moment to then announce it. So I figured it's either going to happen at the end of the presentation, or it would have happened and exploded off already, and then we would have had a load more of stuff strung next to it. So that's what I thought was happening at this point. I figured that there was a bigger announcement that was fallen through before E3, and Sony were like, well, we can't show our faces now, and so let's just get a load of random games put together, I suppose. That's what it felt like at this point. But then I went from being bored to awake, because we then got a new game from the people behind Katamari Damacy. Okay, yes, this is what I'm talking about. This is called Watam, I think, and it reminds me why I got into PlayStation in the first place. And no, not just because that was the only console I had in the house as a child. It reeks of that PlayStation experimental kind of, like, exclusives that no other console would dare trying kind of thing. And I don't know what to think about the walking nose, that was disgusting, but it's got character and it's intriguing, which is more than what I can say for Humanity, which kicked the whole thing off. After this, we got a game about Santa, who got lost on his way home to the North Pole after a heavy night out at the pub. Yes, this is Arise, which is giving me a lot of Journey and Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons vibes, and I hope it's a little bit more interactive than Journey personally. Journey wasn't really my thing, but I loved Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, so I hope it's leaning more that way than the other. But yeah, that was pretty cool. This then kicked off into the load of VR announcements, and I mean, to be fair, a lot of this was very fast-paced and kind of forgettable, so I couldn't really remember the names of the games. I couldn't write them down fast enough or anything like that. But the one that they started off with was LA Noire VR Case Files, and I mean, LA Noire, I really loved that game personally, so being able to feel even more like a detective, being in the perspective of the detective, reading the facial expressions from your point of view, driving around in really early 20th century LA, I think that's a really, really cool like addition to the PS4. I can't really complain about that. But yeah, like I said, it then moved off into loads more VR experience trailers and absolute new games coming out. And the issue I had was that I started trying to write the names of the games out, but I realised at that point I didn't care because lots of it just looked so bland, and I couldn't tell if lots of them would be experiences or full-on, like, 8-hour games or, like, 5-minute gauntlet battle royale times that you can pick up and put down every couple of hours. I wasn't really sure. But then I got surprised by the inclusion of Space Channel 5 VR. I haven't heard that name since the iToy when it comes to, like, motion control-y kind of stuff. And to be fair, I actually haven't played Space Channel 5 in years anyway. This was really sweet. This was a nice, cool, unexpected announcement. And the fact that it's coming in VR, I don't know if it'll make me sick. It probably will. I mean, if you know Space Channel 5, it probably would make you sick. But it's still cool either way. I'm not complaining about Space Channel 5 at all. This moved on to the Medieval announcement, which we already knew about, but this is actually more about how the demo is out right this second, and I do find it cool how you can unlock an item with the full game by playing the demo. That's really sweet. It gets people to download the demo. Sony can then gauge interest in if people are going to buy this and if they would consider doing it for another PlayStation brand remake in the future. I understand why it's done, but we didn't see anything new. We didn't learn anything new. I'll try the demo at some point, I'm sure, but the full game is so close now. Don't really see the point. I want to be fully surprised because I like the look of it, but performance-wise, doesn't look too promising, so I'd rather wait for the full thing than try a demo if the demo looked as choppy as that, anyway. And then we got an announcement for Civilization on PS4, which is great if you want Civilization on PS4, but for everybody else that's ever played a Civilization game in something else, great. You've already done it, so that's useless information to you. I don't know if by this point it's too little too late to put Civilization on PlayStation, because I guess the fans or people that were interested in Civilization would have already been playing it on other systems anyway, but pfft, what do I know? Death Stranding was next, and I was really worried that they were going to show off a little bit too much, because personally I have avoided most, if not all, trailers related to the game and most press, because I want to be as bewildered and confused and I want to experience everything as first time as possible, as completely blind as possible. So I was really worried that they were going to go into a little bit more detail with the characters and the story, which I don't want them to do. I want it to be a total bloody convoluted mess. I want to really feel it from beginning to end as intended, not with any prior knowledge. So I'm glad that they didn't. And instead they announced some new hardware, the PS4 Pro bundle with the Death Stranding skin and the Death Stranding controller. Gotta be honest, I do think it's really cool how it's themed around the game. It's cool, it's got the baby and everything, which is brilliant, lovely touch, but it looks like it looks like a piss pot made into a controller, one that you'd get at the hospital. Sony, what's wrong with you? When I play PS4, I don't want to think of my incontinent nan. Next was some info for a new game called Afterparty, which looks extremely cool, I will not lie. It looks really funny, it looks really interesting, it looks unique, again, harkering back to why I love PlayStation exclusivity in the first place, even though I'm not sure this is exclusive, but beside my point, I'm just saying it looks unique. And it's made from the same people that made Oxenfree. I've never played Oxenfree myself, but I've heard lots of good things about it. So, cool. I mean, it's another cool thing. Brilliant. Then we got the PS Plus lineup. This is a Twitter announcement. This is a footnote. This is not something you build up your audience to tune in at a certain time on a certain day and cancel any plans that they may have had to tell people about. PS Plus monthly free games happen every month. You can announce them anywhere, and it's cool. You don't need to save it for State of Play. Could you imagine if they went to E3 this year and came out with, by the way guys, PS Plus, here are the monthly games? Could you imagine? It's stupid, right? It's really stupid. It's not a brand new system. PS Plus has been going on for a while now. We all know about it. And if you don't know about it, if you follow PlayStation or you care about PlayStation or you've ever looked up getting an online subscription for PlayStation, you know about it already. This was a complete waste of time. And yeah, I suppose it's nice that we've got The Last of Us remastered, even though the main game itself was out years and years ago, and the remaster, again, came out a good few years ago, so I think if anyone was going to play it, they would have already played it. But I suppose with Last of Us 2 on the horizon, makes sense that it's there, and it's nice that it's for free, so, I mean, you can't complain about anything being free. But then, and this is where I get confused about why they thought this announcement was a good thing to put in, because they put MLB The Show 19. Why? I mean, I'm not saying, I don't play sports games myself, and I'm not saying that people don't deserve to know when there's sports games coming out for their favourite system, especially if that's all they play. I'm not saying that the target audience don't like sports games, and I'm not saying if you enjoy sports games and you like this announcement that this was a total waste of time and you're the wrong people that they should be appealing to. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that after such a mediocre, lackluster set of announcements, they not only then go, oh, by the way, this isn't any new games coming out, but this is a monthly free thing that we also do that we've been doing for ages. Did you know? And then they also throw in an extremely old game that everyone's probably already played at this point, especially when we've known about The Last of Us 2 for a while and people have probably been going out of their way to play the original before that game came out. So that's already kind of a moot point for being a free game. But then they also decide to make it, make a big deal out of it being a baseball game. And it's like, it looks like every other sports game, but just baseball. I don't see what the big deal is of making it a big selling point to PS Plus. They put more info. They put more emphasis and effort into the trailer for NBL the show than a lot of the games they had in the VR section, which is a PlayStation only thing. PSVR is its own entity. The PSVR games you get, they may be able to come out on Oculus, on Steam and stuff, but most of the PSVR stuff is on PSVR. They didn't give any attention to that. They gave attention to NBL the show being free. It wasn't even like it was a new game announcement. It was just a thing that they said that was a thing. Completely missing the mark. And when people got upset with Microsoft all those years ago at E3, that one time they were talking non-stop about television, sports, television, sports, television, sports. This isn't as excessive as that, but I can't believe that Sony haven't learnt their lesson from how people reacted to that. And they must know how the internet behaved. They must know how the internet would have taken this whole thing in the first place. And if you looked at the chat during this announcement, it was all full of the same sentiments. Yeah, a lot of it was extreme, a lot of it was horrible, a lot of it was not called for. But they must have known that would have caused that kind of reaction, so why did they put it in there? I mean, we know sports games are a thing. They come out every single year without fail. There's American football, soccer, football, UK football, there's basketball, there's all these kinds of bloody sports games. So why save it for a state of play and put emphasis on the fact that it's on PS Plus and it's free? It blows my mind. This is where I was going to say that Nintendo Direct can get away with stuff like this more than Sony, because the thing is, Nintendo have the Switch right now, and the Switch is not only awesome, but it's hot stuff right now because it's a portable system that can also be a home console system. So when they talk about, oh, we have Overwatch now, or we have a game that was released 5-6 years ago on this thing now, it's different because it's now a way you can play it portably. That's exciting. Nintendo can get away with that kind of thing. If they said, oh yeah, by the way, we've got NBL the show coming out on Switch, yeah, I wouldn't care about it, but loads of people would be completely indifferent because it's like, oh well, great, it's another game that we can now play portably. But this is just another thing for a thing we already know is a thing, and then emphasizing that it's a thing, and an already weird, lackluster, completely pointless state of play so far. So it's really weird to me. It's just weird. And of course, this is what state of play was building up to the entire time, the entire reason this whole thing existed, which just makes me think, why didn't they bother just making this its own separate announcement? But The Last of Us 2, we've got more stuff going on here. We've got more focus on Ellie and the potential new partner. Tommy and Joel's brother was there. And then while I was sitting there thinking, oh god, I would love to have seen more about what the hell happened between Joel and Ellie after the end of Last of Us 1, which, don't get me wrong, I think ended perfectly for the game it was, but I did want to see the aftermath of what that lie meant. I did want to see what happened. I don't think it was a cliffhangery ending. I think it ended very well. It closed off their character arcs really nicely, but it did open itself up for more development and how each of them reacted to each other and what happened to each of them. So while I was sitting there thinking, oh god, are we going to drop that? Did Ellie just run away from Joel or what? There he is. There's Joel. He's back. Whoa, okay. Very cool. Very excited. Would love to see it. I'm just sad that I had to sit through 19 minutes of fluff to get there. Oh, we also got a release date in February, so, right after Valentine's Day, you can depress your loved ones with The Last of Us 2. It was at this point, after The Last of Us 2 release date announcement and everything else that happened, that I figured that I knew what this was for. Everyone was waiting for more stuff on The Last of Us. People were waiting for PS5 stuff. People were waiting for loads of other secret announcements, especially after E3, people were waiting for a lot more new than what this state of play presented to us. And so this was basically just a load of Walmart commercials that were stapled before a big actual announcement that they knew people would care about, and they knew that was actually putting them through most of their stuff right now, because God of War was a while ago at this point, and so their next big thing is The Last of Us 2, and so what better way to get away with promoting that game than to make an entire state of play dedicated to it so the most amount of people could see it as possible, but before that have what is essentially a stapled back-to-back YouTube mid-rolls of other games and other services like PS Plus before that bit that nobody would really care that much about. There was some new stuff in there. There was some awesome looking stuff, but there wasn't enough to justify it feeling like a string of really cool announcements. That's the problem. It felt like a load of trailers to cover the costs of announcing more The Last of Us 2. All of the bits before The Last of Us 2 felt like you were watching TV and it was like a commercial break before we came back to The Last of Us 2. And that's really sad, because there were exclusive things in there, but they either weren't given enough attention, wasn't enough exclusive stuff, which is why Nintendo Direct works so well, because they usually have nothing but exclusive stuff, and then ports of other things that people wanted to see portably, so that's just a bonus at that point, but that's what it felt like. They just needed... If they're going to do something like this, they need way, way more exclusives. They need to justify the reason that it exists. And the thing is, what makes this very interesting to me is that if they had come out at E3 this year with this state of play, and that's all they had, which they would have had less of back then, by the way, because this is the most recent updates they could give us, right? So they would have had less than this right now. If they would have come out on stage and said that, if they would have come out on stage and said / done that, then yeah, they would have been laughed off the stage, right? It would have been a disaster. So it's interesting to me how they knew that something like that would have costed them far too much money for no return in investments or anything for going to E3 with that little information. And because they knew that, they decided not to go, because they knew how little value they have in what they're doing right now. State of Play feels like even Sony themselves don't see value in it, because they wouldn't even show it at E3. They wouldn't go to a live press conference and do their own thing there, and they wouldn't show a State of Play during E3. And the fact it's 20 minutes is even clever as well, because unlike Nintendo Directs, which go on for a long time, sometimes 2 hours or so, especially if there's new games that they want to demonstrate, like in detail, but like the fact it's 20 minutes, once you sit through the first 18 minutes and then you get to The Last of Us 2, you can't complain then about, well, that was the biggest waste of my time ever, because if it was an hour long, then people would leave before the ending and everything. It's just long enough where people will stay through all the commercialization before they get to the actual announcements that people care about, but just long enough for it to feel like it wasted your time and it was building up to something, which this one didn't feel like it was. It wasn't like better announcement after better announcement after better announcement. It was all over the place, and then it was just crescendoed all of a sudden with Last of Us 2, which was hampered by everything that came before it, even if there was stuff that looked great, like Watam and Space Channel 5 VR. I mean, God, on the same day that this state of play went live, they also announced the Final Fantasy VII box art for PS4. Like, with everything else going on, that kind of thing would have fitted in State of Play. I don't think it would have been worth being in State of Play, but with everything else that they had showing up, with the very Twitter announcement-y kind of, like, vibes to everything, this would have been something that would have been small, but I think people would have really liked to see it. I don't know why, if they felt like they could show that off on its own separately, why they couldn't then do that with most of the other stuff that they had here, instead of bundling all of the really exciting and cool stuff amongst a load of stuff that no one cares about and that will then cause nobody to watch the next State of Play, which then means that they'll save a load of exclusive indie stuff and upcoming dev stuff in the next State of Play that people aren't going to see because they've been, like, disappointed with the ones before. So why don't they just stick with announcements that people will actually care about instead of hiding them? Yeah, like I said, all these indie devs and all the exciting, interesting looking games from like the Katamari Damacy people or stuff, they'll get stuck and lost in a state of play that less and less and less people are going to watch as the years go on, because they just don't have anything like Nintendo to keep people coming back. Imagine if Nintendo Direct was like this, but it went on for an hour and the first 50 minutes were this, and then all of a sudden there was Smash Brothers at the end, like before Smash Brothers Ultimate came out. Imagine that. Like, that's the level we're talking about. But that would be ridiculous. Nobody would do that. But Sony can get away with doing something like that with 20 minutes, because 20 minutes in the grand scheme of things isn't that long. But people still had to cancel what they were doing, sit down in the same place for a live stream, like get there at the right time and everything, and get presented with boring news, presented boringly. And it just goes to show that it was a good idea that they didn't go to E3. I mean, people thought the last Nintendo Direct was bad. Jesus Christ! If you're going to do something like this in the future, Sony, save more info. No info would have been better than this. No info would have been better than this, and they could have just announced an exclusive Last of Us clip on Twitter or something. That would have had more impact. It would have got to the point better. And then all the other games that were coming out for PS4 and all the new, like, exciting indie dev projects and everything, they could have had more focus, more attention, more exciting presentation than what they got mixed in with PS Plus. State of Play, it's not impressing me so far, and Sony haven't proved that they have anything worth filling out that kind of time with, unlike Nintendo, so maybe it's best that they just wait for E3 and they just get rid of this.